Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chess Olympiad. And this has been an incredible Chess Olympiad thus far. We've got stories, obviously, about Magnus Carlsen. We have stories about the Indian delegations, both the men and the women. We have incredible young talents playing some spectacular chess. Today's recap has banger after banger chess games, some spectacular middle game battles, tactical battles, and teams emerging in contention for first place. We also have a story about Ding Liren, the sitting world chess champion, who has to defend his title in 2 months here in 2024. And whenever you watch this 3 months in the future, he either defended his title against all odds or lost the title. His story is really, really a wild one and a little bit sad to see. So I'm gonna get into all of that. All right, and that's what I have for you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our drone flight to Budapest. Okay, first of all, Magnus Carlsen taking on Parham Maghsoodloo. This is Norway versus Iran, and this is a story that Magnus is very familiar with. He is the best player in the world, but his team is not the best team in the world. He is surrounded by several very, very strong grandmasters, but it's like any team sport. They all have to perform. So Magnus, as always, arriving late. 7 minutes. So I'm sure we have a clip of that somewhere. He plays e4, and Parham Maghsoodloo plays c6. He plays the Caro-Kann defense, a man after my own heart. We get d4, which is obviously very normal, standard move. And 1 second, let me clear out I had chess.com open on the right side. If moves were going to get made, you would have heard double clicking. We have d5, e5, and bishop f5. So Magnus playing e5. This is the most principled way to play against the Caro-Kann defense. I have faced this many times myself. Parham does not play c5. He plays bishop to f5, and Magnus plays knight d2. So what I always find fascinating about Magnus is, like, how does he decide to play knight d2? I mean, you know, there's h4, there's knight f3. He goes for the knight d2 system. I faced this recently myself, and after e6, knight b3, I played a6, which is a very nice move. And after a6, I went for c5, the immediate move. c5, so knight f3, c5, and this line where I get, not that obviously, I get the knight, and we have this position. And, you know, in this game, we get knight d7 and a traditional setup from Maghsoodloo, who plays knight d7, knight e7. h6 brings the bishop back, and Magnus plays a4, a5, and bishop d2. All of this has been seen before. Like, actually, if you check the database, this position has been reached many, many, many times, and there's different setups for black. I don't think bishop d2, or somewhere in here, like, it's not the most common thing. I think sometimes black plays g5, and black plays queen c7, but you will notice that in this game, none of those moves have happened. Instead, we have queen b6. So queen b6 is relatively normal. White is trying to play c4 in a lot of positions. Magnus plays rook c1 as he's preparing c4. g5 is now chosen by Parham. And g5 wins space. It also maybe dislodges some material here. Magnus plays king h1. It's a very mysterious move. Maybe the idea was g4, knight g1. But knight h4 is perfectly strong as well. Obviously, there's some ideas here, so you know you want to be a little bit careful. For example, if c3, g4, knight h4, h5, f3, the e pawn is hanging, right? So you can't play f3 here. So maybe he was like, I'm going to play king h1, and this is what I'm going to do. Parham plays knight g6. And it's Magnus who, from the early opening, just has a better position. Knight h4, they trade, so now Parham is not going to be able to castle. He kicks out the bishop. c4, Parham goes back to f8, and Magnus is just better. The computer wants him to trade and play f4. It wants him to make this hole. Obviously, black is trying to put the knight there, but it's actually totally fine. And Stockfish after knight e6 just really likes this position. It doesn't think that black has a lot of activity. Magnus plays f4 straight away, which is also okay. And now Parham makes a mistake because after knight f5 and bishop to g1, white is just very close to breaking open black's position. And you look at black's position, like, this is not the way pieces are supposed to be set up. There are some alarm bells going off. So we have gf4. Now Magnus takes on d5. So he does get to that nice structure. He plays rook f4, knight g7. Something feels wrong here. This is not how chess is supposed to be played. I don't know what we're doing. I have never seen a setup like that. That means it's probably quite bad. Here's the problem, though. It's not so simple to win this game. It's not so simple to win this game because you don't have any pawn moves. What I mean by that is you're not going to play g4, h4, h5. You're not going to do that. You're not going to, you can't play b4. So you have to outmaneuver black here with your pieces. And that's not so simple to do. Magnus plays queen c2. That move makes a lot of sense. The rook is not hanging. The knight on f8 defends it. Now this very obscure move, h5. Just trying to gain a little bit more space on that side of the board. Now Magnus plays rook f1, doubling. Not the best move, by the way. The engine wants knight f1. I can't really explain why. Maybe trying to go to f5 and make some trades. Really unclear here. But in every line, the engine doesn't have a clear winning idea for white on the low human depth, but it's just claiming white is sort of forever better. Knight e6, rook f5, queen b6, and now Magnus is like, well, I know I'm better, but how do I break through this position? So he plays knight b1. He spends 10 minutes, nearly half his time here, which every chess coach on the planet would tell you, you cannot spend 10 minutes here. I mean, maybe a chess coach would say that to Magnus, but like, he's Magnus, so when he thinks for 10 minutes, it's not quite the same thing, you know? I'm sure he thought of 1,000,005 different things. So knight b1, now Parham again plays a very mysterious move, h4, but it's actually the best move. And I think the point is very simple. I think you just want to play h3. And basically you want to get rid of this weakness, and this also activates the rook, and if takes, now the king is weak. So Parham plays for this, Magnus plays h3. Now Parham goes here, just going to the g file. I mean, it's still not, how do you break through this position with white? A few moves ago, it was plus 1.9. I mean, that is a major, major advantage. And I guess the plan was, you had to put the knight on e3. And then you had to make some improvements. Like you had to maybe break through on the f-file with knight e3, knight f5. But that is not the plan Magnus chooses. He goes to the other side of the board. And all of a sudden, he's got 8 minutes. And it's still not clear how he's supposed to break through. Here, again, best move is rook d1 if you let the engine run. And then the idea is rook d1, knight f1, bring the rook back, and put the knight on e3, and I guess put the knight on f5. The key idea here is to get this knight to d6. So, for example, rook d1, rook g6, knight f1. Black can never castle, right? So let's say knight g7, you get kicked out. Knight fe6, knight e3, and if knight f8, the knight goes to the next right side of the board. So knight e3, the best move is, for example, bishop e3, and you try to play this position. Because you gain the bishop for the knight, and allegedly white is just better. But you have to find this idea, and Magnus here suddenly is down to 6 minutes. He's still trying, but b3 allows knight takes d4, which Parham doesn't play. Here, both guys make a series of mistakes. b3, bad move. Queen b4, bad move. The best move now is to play rook to f1 to try to get the knight to f3. Magnus goes here with 2 because he's defending his pawn. Bad move. Now queen d2 offering a queen trade is the best move. Bad move by Parham. Rook d3 now to stop queen d2 is the best move. Magnus goes here, also bad move. And now Parham plays the best move, which is attacking the rook. Rook f6, you can take it, but then I'm going to take back multiple ways. Instead, Parham finds it. And actually, the game just literally trades down into an endgame where winning is going to be impossible. So a game where even the GOAT didn't quite fully grasp all of the necessary concepts of maneuvering. It was clear he had an advantage, but he has no idea it's +2, right? Like, you look at the position differently, you know it's +2. He can't find the best way forward. And he actually, I mean, he goes on to draw the game, obviously, even though he was a pawn up. This is a draw because, well, you're never going to actually promote this pawn. The king is going to get close, etc. It's a draw. And actually, on board 4, Puya Idani, I believe, got the win for Iran. I hope I'm not messing that up. But Iran beats Norway, and probably Norway is just out of contention for a medal now. So Magnus missing a chance. I mean, a chance is a strong description for this game. And actually, the engine in the end, game review, gives black a higher accuracy than white, even though black was at 2.48 at a certain point in this game. So a very mysterious game. A game that I would love to replicate this position with like a stockfish. Anyway, that's Magnus. We open with the premier act. Now we need to move to board 1. On board 1, Ding Liren is playing Le Quang. Liem is the board 1 for Vietnam. He's a monster. He's like a top 10, top 15 player in the world for the last several years. Also in Rapid and Blitz. Ding Liren, meanwhile, is down to like number 20 something in the world. I mean, it actually is quite wild. All right. So this game, Vietnam, on average, is about 150 points higher, I think, on all the other boards. I said that Vietnam is outrated by China on every board, except board 1. Yes, except for the board 1 matchup, it's quite close. So Ding plays c4, and Liem clearly takes the approach in the early game, like, he's going to go c5, and he's going to play solidly. g3, d5, which is trying to play for a Grunfeld, bishop g2, g6. Now Ding plays h4. So this is clearly an indication that Ding is rejuvenated. I'm actually not sure Ding has won a classical chess game against elite opposition this year, because that's all he plays. Ding has 4 draws in the Olympiad. So he's obviously trying to play this game for a win. Board 1, white pieces, playing h4 and h5, and then even h6, forcing the bishop out. I mean, very imbalanced game. And now knight to h2. Look at this. Hitting the knight, trying to get the pawns rolling. Very imbalanced game. Knight b6. He attacks on both sides of the board. So it's a very, very dynamic battle. We have knight going to a5. Liem shuts it down. Ding plays knight to e4. Grabs the bishop pair. Right, so he has the light-scored bishop. c4 is an interesting move chosen by Liem to control these 2 pawns, to put pressure, right? Oh my god. Something is in my throat. d3. Rook c8. And from the opening, it was Ding, man. He had a typical Ding position. Ding has played a lot of Catalan. So in the Catalan, you get this Catalan bishop, you get the queenside pressure, but Liem calls his bluff and takes a pawn. And you will notice that Ding is down 20 minutes on the clock, and this has been a recurring theme in recent times, where he does get quite low on time. He also did it in the Singfield Cup, where he played recently. Ding didn't win a game there. I actually apologize. I think Ding won in Tata Steel in January. So at the very beginning of the year, Ding won a couple of games there. But since then, I don't think he's won a classical chess game, which is kind of crazy. Now, if you're ever going to do it, this is kind of the spot to do it in, right? It's the Olympiad. Now, the best move here is to trade with a check. Pawn takes f6, so you grab the bishops, and then you put the bishop on e3. And this pressure is very nice. This is Catalan style. If knight takes on f3, e takes. Kings are safe mutually, but believe it or not, black is actually worse. Despite being up a pawn, because the knight, oh my god, because of this, because of rook d7, because of rook d3, and then doubling, and also the weak king. The king is weak in every endgame. So instead of that, Ding takes the knight, which is not the best move, but it's still around equal. And now very clearly, and by the way, here Ding again had a choice between taking a pawn, taking on e7 and playing pawn to b3. There was, I mean, I'm not like trying to backseat. I'm simply giving you the play-by-play. Instead, it kind of fizzles out his advantage. Liem does a nice job defending, and this is just equal. Each side has an A and B pawn. Black has actually maybe a better structure even, because now that pawn, you know, the king is going to walk up and attack this pawn. So Ding actually has to be a little bit careful, but it's nothing special. They trade off their weaknesses. This is just, unfortunately, heading for a draw. Ding is not going to get enough here. He's going to lose the pawn, but because the king is cut off on the edge of the board, it's going to be impossible to re-enter with the king. Except Ding now decides to take on h7, which is fine, makes sense. But now it's a 2-on-1. So bishop c5 is a nice trick. If bishop c5, there is rook h5 check, and we go to this endgame. Which you would think makes sense because you split the pawns. But the thing is that this pawn has no enemy now. Whereas here, if we went into an endgame like bishop c5, rook h5, king g6, rook c5, this pawn walks into a pawn. So this is even more of a draw. Ding decides, all right, I'm not gonna defend this endgame with the bishops. This is a draw, easy peasy, rook d8. All right, let's make the draw. And it's just not a draw. It's losing. Rook h2 is the key idea. I mean, rook h2 and king goes to e3. And this is not a draw because the way you defend a king and pawn and rook endgame is the Philidor position, which is a position where the pawn never crosses the third rank, and when it does, you give checks from the other side. But this is not the Philidor. Here, this is long side defense. Short side defense is where you should defend, but you're on the long side. So Liam demonstrates how to win this endgame because he cuts off the king. He's going to run his king here, and he's simply winning. And Ding resigns because what's going to happen is king c2, rook c8, and the king will go to d1. You go rook whatever. I go d2, right? You go here, and I check you. And I check you away. So king e1, and that's it. I simply win. King e1, d1. GG. King e1, there is also this, but it doesn't work because of rook f1. So out of nowhere, from a seeming position of pressure, like an equal endgame, Ding just, like, I don't know. It's shocking. I mean, this is not an endgame. This endgame is also wild because if you think about the math, these pawns are going to walk down. If for some reason you end up in a position you have to give up a bishop for a pawn, rook and bishop versus rook is a theoretical draw. You could be down a full bishop. But instead of that, Ding goes for this endgame, and he's right. His intuition is 100% right. This is a draw. But defending it is actually quite tricky. You have to bring the king forward. He doesn't do that. And now he brings it, but it's too late now. And here, there was even a way, apparently, to draw it, but he just goes down. I mean, he just gets... And he doesn't defend, and now it's game over. So Ding Liren's rating after this game is I got it. It's on 2700chess.com. It's 2726. Which is, I don't know, I don't think it's been, you know, again, same story with a lot of players in the Olympiad, but like 2726 is wild. For Gukesh is 2775. The challenger is now 50 points higher rated. That is wild. I'm not sure the last time that's happened. Maybe Kasparov, when he was the challenger. I'm not even sure how ELO worked back then. The good news for Ding Liren is that the board 4 of China, Wang Yue, he defeated board 4 from Vietnam. So they drew their match. Otherwise, that would have been wild. Board 1 losing. And the craziest thing is Ding gave an interview yesterday where he said, Gukesh is the favorite against me. Like, there's no way I can buy that. Like, you know, I'm very conflicted because the chess world still always feels small. We all feel like we know each other a little bit. We don't know each other, but it's parasocial of me. You do feel bad for a guy like Ding Liren because he gives all these interviews. Such a nice guy. Everybody talks about him so glowingly, but he's clearly not in form right now. And you root for the guy. But there's also the part of you that's like, can you imagine your favorite athlete going and saying, oh, I'm not the favorite in the match. Like, I'm probably going to lose. What? Can you imagine Djokovic saying that in an interview? Like, Alcaraz? Any athlete that you cheer for? It just blows my mind. I'm like, I can't wrap my head around that. So he's got 2 months, man. The match starts late November. Now, the good news is China and, you know, they're all still competing for the gold, and so is Vietnam. Excellent showing by them. Okay, now I'm going to show you a couple of teams which might surprise you. I'm going to show you Lithuania, Azerbaijan, Italy versus England. It's like the Euros, basically. Sorry, England, too soon. Italy didn't even, like, freaking do anything in the Euros. Then we're going to go and check in on the Indians. All right, that's what we're going to do. So, Lithuania versus Azerbaijan. We have Pultinivicius versus Abbasov. Abbasov played in the candidates tournament. This game was a Nimzo Indian. It was e3, bishop d3, and a3, targeting the bishop. It's a very sharp and theoretical line. Here there are many lines for white. Not this one, though. So I've never seen what Paulios played. I'm actually going to look this up afterward. If I check the opening database, the most common move here by far is bishop d3. But he puts his bishop on a2. Black plays b6, castles, and a system here with bishop b2. Now, you got to wonder what that bishop said before the game to Paulios. And if it said something, he probably needs professional medical help. because I don't think they can talk. But like, why would you put your bishop behind the pawns? Well, you put your bishop here because you have a dream. All right, your dream is. Let's just assume you're mildly delusional. Your dream is something that looks like this. And there we go. Right, black is obviously not going to let that happen. So rook c1, e5. Black attacking the center. Paulius plays rook e1. Also f4 here, very interesting move, trying to activate the rook like that. Rook e1. And here Abasov does something mistimed. He plays c4. His logic was, this bishop is bad, here it's not much better, and now this bishop will never activate. And so his logic was c4, and then I'm going to play e4, and white will never attack me because white center will be locked. He's not wrong. He has the right idea. The problem with his right idea, all right? Problem with his right idea is that now Paulius plays this, and this is going to be the problem. Because now e4, you always have the option to pressure the pawn, and that's exactly what happens. And Abasov is never going to be able to properly close the center because this pawn is a huge target. He's still trying to close the center. Paulius is like, no. I'm going to bring my queen over here, or maybe even knight h5, knight f5. We're going to have a talk. Queen to e6. Now the rook obviously has no job on the c file, so it slides over to the d file. Some of you may be wondering, going, why is this not happening? Yeah, because of e4. And the loss of the pawns here is meaningless because what happens is white gets a massive space advantage and two very powerful pawns. So it's a very nice idea by Paulius. a6, queen f5, actually, believe it or not, trading the queens here and going to that late middle game, early end game is the right decision. He goes queen g5, which is not the best move, but it still shows how difficult the position is here. Now d5, and hey, that dream is going to happen soon. Wait a minute. No, it's not, because how are you going to get rid of this pawn? Yeah, well, d5 is not for the bishop. d5 is just to open the d file. Now fe, and now knight f5. And, right, some nice ideas here. Knight h6 check. Knight is going to e7. Rook on f1, rook f3, rook g3, rook f4, right? Like all these kinds of ideas. Knight d4, rook d6, all this stuff. Knight d6. And Abasov plays rook a7. That is a lackadaisical move because here comes rook d6. Here comes e5. And here comes a move that doesn't even look possible. Rook takes f6. And black resigns because any way he takes, there's a discovered attack, and I win your queen. An absolutely breathtaking game by Paulius Pultinivicius, who beats Abasov. This is the only decisive game of the match, and Lithuania is in the running for a medal with several rounds remaining. Tomorrow is a rest day, but Lithuania literally outrated on every board of this match, by some by hundreds of points. They have their big guy on board one, literally, the guy's huge, Titas Stremavicius. He's very strong, and I mean they're all Viciuses, right? They're all Lithuanians. So yeah, I mean this is a team of 2,500 rated grandmasters, and they're cooking. They are really cooking. Italy versus England was a wild match. We have Luca Moroni Jr. Shout out to Dad. And Luke McShane. So we have Luca and Luke. We have the matchup of whether this name is better pronounced Luca or the other way around. Right? So d4, knight f6. Luke McShane has the title of Grandmaster. He also has the title of the world's strongest amateur chess player. I think he did back when he was 2,700. The lore about him was that he had a full-time job, but he was also 2,700, which is pretty cool, you know? Evidently, the full-time job took some attention and he lost some of his rating points, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. It is not my job to criticize anybody for losing ELO. I lose plenty on my own. But yeah, he chose the right thing because I think he's like making, you know, a good living being a real a person in real job, not, you know, not these grandmasters. Anyway, this game was a regular queen's pawn, nothing special. Black played c5. Moroni played knight a4 and said, you can't take my knight anymore. And now I'm going to bring it, you know, back to c3 when I have a chance. The boys started battling a little bit on the queen side with b5, d6. I got to tell you, from the early opening, what white did here was fantastic. Here, the best plan is actually put the knight there and then play bishop e3. I don't get it, but I think the point is that if you play bishop e3, it's harder to play knight d2. Why? Because, for example, if now you're like, I want to play knight d2, and now black plays d5. And if you had started with knight d2 instead of the immediate bishop e3, d5 makes less sense now because c5 is possible. Not only is it possible, it's probably just winning. So knight d2 there was better. Luca plays here because what could possibly be more natural, but actually it's a very prophylactic move here, and now e5. And actually, McShane makes a pretty serious positional error and misjudgment. If d5 happens now, white is in great shape, because c5 is actually not as useful as you would think. McShane's idea here was g6, probably, followed by, let's say, rook c8, followed by, let's say, knight h5, bishop g7, and clearly some kingside play. Now, after e5, white takes and immediately goes wrong. And black has the option to open up the position, but he does something even more gangster. He just gives up the rook completely. He's like, I don't want it. This is a very common idea in many different King's Indians, and you just have the dark squares. That's what you have. Your position comes alive. Look at McShane's bishop. It is more of a job and probably a bigger salary than he ever had. I mean, like, the dude is just absolutely cooking on b7. Nobody can challenge the bishop. The knight comes into e4. The whole position plays itself. Just a spectacular game. Queen to e2, but now things are getting a little crazy. So apparently the best move for McShane was to keep the bishop. Don't take it. The rook is not worth it. But he takes. He gives up the centralized bishop. Now the pawn is taken. But now here comes knight takes b6. All right, because this is hanging. Rook b8, knight d5. And actually now Moroni is winning if he plays knight takes a5. And he spots it. Knight takes a5 is unbelievable. The point is that after queen a5, knight e7, king g7, knight c8, it looks like the knight is trapped. It looks like the knight is trapped. But now you play b6 and b7. And this position is winning for white because of rook a1 and rook a8. Now, Moroni doesn't see that concept. He goes here instead, and the advantage is gone. After bishop c5, rook a8, and queen d8. And everything is at a standstill. Nobody can move. So we have h3. But suddenly we have queen f6. And actually, black can move, and black is about to mate white. Queen e2. Knight g4. You can't take with either pawn. If you take with the pawn, you get mated. If you take with the queen, you get mated. So knight e7 is the best move. Now in comes the knight. Here, check, here, queen c, queen h1 is mate. Queen f3, knight d3, queen g1 is mate. Now, what black has to do here is just calmly advance the h-pawn. He doesn't find that he goes here. Queen e2, but now knight f3, the knight gets sacrificed again. And you cannot take it because queen g1. It looks losing here already. But here, Moroni had to play rook g8. And the point of rook to g8 is that when the king runs out, queen e4, knight f3 check, king g2, queen g1, king f3, queen f1, king g4, queen d1 is a draw. It's a draw. You have to include rook to g8. Why? Because what happens in the game after queen e2, knight f3, right? And the king moves, like it just did in the game. Well, now the knight can actually just leave the position. So what happens is they repeat, and then in this position again, knight g5 is unstoppable mate. You may be sitting there going, sorry, what is the difference? Let me tell you the difference. So the knight left, right? In this position, if Moroni had played rook g8 and king h6, right, and then he would have went for the same thing, the queen is on a different square, right? So in the game, the queen was going to e2. And you cannot go to e4 because knight f3 and all the same problems, right? So knight f3 check, king g2, queen g1, queen f3, here, h5. h5. The reason Moroni needed to give this check is so that there is no h5. So he goes to e4, queen f3, king g2, queen g1. Here. There is no h5. There is no h5. I sound like a crazy person, you know? Just like, there is no h5. I just stare at the sky all day. So, yeah. That's the point, and he misses that detail, and knight g5 and queen g1 is just GG. There's nothing you can do about it. You gotta sacrifice your queen. And England beats Italy. Now, I'm gonna check in with the Indians real quick. All I'm gonna say is they're cooking. I don't know what they're cooking. They're cooking biryani, maybe they're cooking some naan, some paneer. They're cooking, and it is delicious. Okay? First of all, we're going to check in with the women, because the women dominating, absolutely dominating the Olympiad. They got Tanya Sajdev, they have Harika Dronavali, they have Vantika Agrawal. I mean, you name it, they have a player above 24. Like in the top 10, they have Vaishali Ramesh Babu, sister of Prague, right? And also a grandmaster in her own right. Divya Deshmukh versus Elina Danielian. This is India versus Armenia. This is an advanced French defense. And there is this line, Rookie 1. Now, dare I say, Divya probably has one of my courses. Probably not. I would hope not, because she's like a 2,500 level Grandmaster level player. But I actually, I made a course for Chessable a while back, because I had to. You know, it was hard for me to choose which lines to select because I already have an E4 course, which is on my E4 course, but I chose this line of the Advanced French where you gambit the pawn on C3. Very, very good line. And then you play it like this. And you really insist that they take. Now, if black plays inaccurately, if black doesn't know exactly what they're doing, you will have a very powerful initiative. And in this game, that's sort of what happened. Like, Divya played in a very aggressive way. She targeted the pawns. Black has to be very careful, very careful. For example, h6, there is all sorts of queen h5 stuff already. Like, you got to be really, really careful here. Her opponent plays knight a5. Now, knight a5 straight up loses because of queen h5. I don't know why Divya didn't go for this. Obviously, she didn't like something. But after knight b3, queen f7, king d8, this is winning. Here you have to just recapture the knight and be like, I'm chilling, I'm winning. But that's not so simple to always do. Unfortunately for black, the position is still very complicated. And knight takes h7 out of nowhere. I mean, this is not a move that you're accustomed to seeing. And now queen g4, and it's only going to go from bad to worse. So white is already completely winning. c4 ripping open the position. Bishop g6 ripping open the position. You have to do something. Rook d1 check is coming. We trade the bishop off. We apply more pressure. And the worst part about this position for white, for black rather, is you cannot stop the pawn. h5, h6, h7. Queen. Boop. You trade. For h6. You push the pawn. I stop the pawn. I stop the pawn. I'm going to play h7. That's literally how Divya won the game. She played h4, h5, h6, h7. There was absolutely nothing black could do. Takes, takes. Queen g4, you can't take the pawn. Queen g8 check. And you defend. You pick up some more pawns. And this is game over. And India is perfect in the women's section. Absolutely dominant. They are beating every single team. And they are making it look relatively effortless. In the Open, India is also the only team on a perfect score. This team is a monster. Gukesh drew this round against Rapport, who was the board one. Pragnananda drew against Peter Leko, who is like a world top, 3-4 player in his prime. Shugirov Erigaisi. Erigaisi, I don't know who made this man angry. And by the way, Erigaisi gave an interview. They've been asking all these grandmasters. You know what my favorite thing to do is? When FIDE or any international, like chess media asks top players who their favorite chess influencer is. Because these guys don't watch these videos. These girls don't watch these videos. They're out there grinding. They're not watching Guess the Elo. Yeah, they're probably watching Guess the Elo, but they're not watching the other stuff. So it's kind of funny when Erigaisi says GothamChess is the best chess influencer. I'm like, my man. I bench pressed yesterday. Oh, that was so stupid. Ow. I hurt my breast. Ow. Okay. Anyway, Arjun, you're the man, and I'm going to keep covering you in these videos. And he keeps winning because he wants me to cover him in the videos. He plays d6, bishop d7. This is a sideline of the Spanish. It's called the deferred Steinitz. It's a very solid line, and you basically play this like a King's Indian defense with the bishop on g7. It's not the King's Indian defense, but we can call it that. All right, knight b4, trading off the light-scored bishops, a5, and look at the time, dude. d6, from the beginning, Shugirov was unsure of himself. He spent 10 minutes on rook e1. He spent 3 more minutes, right? h3. Now he spends another 5 trading the pieces. 24 minutes on queen b3. That's a lot of time, man. That's a lot of time. My coach always said 20. What are you doing? He's down an hour. Erigaisi hasn't spent any time. There's no time. Queen takes b7. Bro goes knight. Look, how well prepared is Arjun? Queen b3, knight c5, queen a4. Erigaisi is still not thinking. Here he finally spends a little bit of time. Maybe he was evaluating knight b3 and knight d5, but he plays all the best moves. Now he's equalized. It's a position of 2 rooks, bishop, knight, knight, and some pawns. It's got to be a draw. There's no way that black can do anything to white here. I mean, his pawns are even battered. But the problem is, Shugirov has spent the majority of this game on the back foot, right? He's spending way more time than his opponent. Erigaisi, all of a sudden, is better. He's better. Now he improves his structure and gets white's bishop. Now he just plays rook e8. b6 is hanging. But if you take on b6, what happens is I win your pawn, and actually I'm asking the questions in the endgame. So in this endgame, I'm asking the questions like, how are you going to defend your pawn? Right? Because look at this. This is very cramped by white. And suddenly things are going wrong. Suddenly things are not going. So white's got a minute. He's got a minute to make 5 moves. Will he survive? King e7, rook d5. It looks like he's going to survive. King f3. He has to make 1 more move. Okay. He survived. Now he gets his extra time, and he plays knight b4. I think he spent 25 minutes on knight b4, because he's supposed to have 30 minutes on the clock in the bonus time. So Shugirov spends so much time, but rook c6 apparently was the drawing mechanism. Leaving this pawn here, and let's say black plays h6, you just leave this position, you target this bishop, and this is the way you try to defend yourself. He goes here. That's wrong, because now there is no more rook move, and this is a winning endgame. The king is too fast. The king is too fast, the pawn is too weak. And my man Arjun Erigaisi is winning games like Magnus Carlsen, all right, out here. I mean, he's trapping the knight. The knight is trapped. It can't leave. He trapped the knight. Bro, he trapped the knight. And the craziest thing is, this position is winning, but not if you take on f5. If you take on f5, I run over here. So king d5, and that's it. It comes down to the final pawn for Arjun. He's 2791 and a half. He's 6-0. He's played 6 games at the Olympiad, and he's won every game he's played. His performance rating is 3,341. Doesn't really make any sense because he's just got a perfect score, so it's embellished, but India on both sides right now is winning the chess Olympiad. Perfect scores in the men's and the women's. That's all I have for you right now. I will see you all for the 7th round. Get out of here.